He sat at the polished mahogany table in the dining room, where the clinking of silverware against fine china sounded like a judgment. Each scrape of a fork, each tap of a glass was a small, sharp reminder of where Liam did not belong. He sat at the polished mahogany table in his own home, a home that felt more like a stage for his wife's ambitions than a sanctuary for their marriage. Clara, his wife, held her wine glass with an effortless grace that seemed practiced, her laughter tinkling like a bell that summoned attention from everyone in the room. Her mother, Eleanor, sat opposite Liam, her posture ramrod straight, her eyes scanning him with a look of perpetual disappointment. It was a look he had grown accustomed to over the past 5 years, a silent critique of his worn suit, his tired eyes and his hands, which were calloused from the double shifts he worked at the logistics firm. They were not the soft hands of the men in her social circle, men who moved money with a phone call instead of moving boxes with a forklift. Tonight was Eleanor's birthday dinner, a lavish affair funded by a credit card Liam knew was teetering on its limit. The guests were Clara's friends, a collection of polished, wealthy individuals who spoke of European vacations and stock portfolios. Liam felt like a ghost at his own table, present in body but invisible in spirit. He had tried to join the conversation early on, mentioning a new efficiency protocol he had designed at work, but the topic was quickly and expertly steered away by Clara toward a more scintillating subject, the upcoming charity gala. The final straw, the moment that would later echo in his mind as the true beginning of the end, came with dessert. A guest, a smirking man named Julian, turned to Liam with condescending pity. "Clara tells me things have been a bit tight for you, Liam. Tough out there for the working man, eh?" Before Liam could even form a response, Clara waved a dismissive hand, her diamond rings catching the light. "Oh, darling, it's more than tight," she said, her voice dripping with a cruel, theatrical sorrow. "Liam is a good man, of course. He tries. But some people are just too broke to be saved." The table fell silent for a heartbeat, the words hanging in the air like poison. Then a few of the guests chuckled, a low, cruel sound that cut Liam deeper than any insult. He looked at his wife, searching for a hint of jest, a flicker of remorse in her eyes. He found none. He only saw a cold, hard finality. She meant it. In her world of glittering surfaces and effortless wealth, he was a lost cause, a sinking ship she was tired of bailing out. He felt the blood drain from his face. Too broke to be saved. The phrase was a dagger twisting in a wound he had been nursing for years. For 2 of those years, every spare dollar, every ounce of his energy had been secretly funneled into what he believed was a life-or-death struggle. For 2 years, he had been paying for Eleanor's extensive and costly medical treatments for a rare autoimmune disorder she had been diagnosed with. He had never told Clara the full extent of the cost. He had not wanted to burden her. He saw the payments as his duty, a silent sacrifice for the family he was trying so desperately to hold together. He sold his car, a vintage Mustang he had restored with his father. He stopped buying lunch, subsisting on sandwiches he made at home. He picked up every overtime shift offered, working until his body ached and his vision blurred with fatigue. All of it was for Eleanor's health, for Clara's peace of mind. And this was his reward, to be publicly shamed, to be declared a financial write-off by the very people he was bleeding himself dry for. He looked from Clara's smug face to Eleanor's, who was dabbing the corner of her mouth with a napkin, a faint, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She had heard, and she approved. In that devastating moment, something inside Liam shifted. It was not a loud crack, but a quiet, cold snap. The part of him that had always made excuses for them, that had always held on to the hope that his love and sacrifice would eventually be recognized, simply died. He excused himself from the table, his voice a low murmur. He walked out of the dining room, past the expensive art on the walls and the designer furniture he was still paying for, and stepped out into the cold night air. The laughter from inside followed him, a mocking echo of his failure. He stood on the porch, his hands trembling, not from the cold, but from a rage so profound it felt like a physical illness. He pulled out his phone and looked at the banking app. He saw the latest transfer, made just yesterday. A significant sum sent to the account number provided by the hospital's specialty clinic. The payment confirmation was there, just like all the others, a simple digital receipt. For 2 years he had seen those receipts as proof of his love. Now, sitting in the cold shadow of his wife's cruelty, a tiny, insidious question began to form in his mind. The history of their marriage was a study in gradual erosion. When Liam first met Clara, she was vibrant and charming, seemingly drawn to his quiet stability and hard-working nature. He was a man with a plan, saving up to start his own small business, a dream he had nurtured since he was a boy. He had a modest inheritance from his grandfather, a nest egg he guarded carefully, meant to be the foundation of their future. Clara had seemed to support his ambitions, or so he thought. After they married, things began to change subtly. Her desire for a more glamorous life became more pronounced. The cozy starter home he had envisioned was dismissed in favor of a sprawling house in a prestigious neighborhood, a house that stretched their finances to the breaking point. The down payment consumed nearly all of his inheritance. He put her name on the deed without a second thought. They were partners, after all. His dream of starting a business was indefinitely postponed. The money was needed for the mortgage, for the car payments on her luxury sedan, for the endless stream of new clothes and home decor she insisted were essential for maintaining their social standing. Liam, blinded by love and a desperate desire to make her happy, agreed to it all. He told himself this was what a good husband did. He provided. Then 2 years ago, Eleanor had fallen ill. The diagnosis was vague, but terrifying, presented to him by a distraught Clara. It was a rare, aggressive autoimmune disease that required specialized, experimental treatments not covered by insurance. The clinic was exclusive, the costs astronomical. Clara had cried in his arms, telling him she did not know what they would do. Liam, without hesitation, had stepped up. He promised he would handle it. He took control of the payments, telling Clara not to worry about the details, to just focus on being there for her mother. It was his burden to bear. This decision, born of love and a sense of duty, became the tool of his own enslavement. Clara and Eleanor's worldview was simple. They were deserving, and he was not. They saw his labor not as a sacrifice, but as his basic function. He was the engine that powered their lives, and when that engine began to sputter under the immense financial strain, they did not offer to help lighten the load. They merely complained about the reduced speed. His worn clothes became a source of embarrassment for Clara. His inability to afford lavish gifts was a personal affront to Eleanor. They spoke of him in his own home as if he were a disappointing employee, one they were reluctant to fire but eager to complain about. Their cruelty was not always overt. It was often couched in backhanded compliments and passive-aggressive sighs. But the message was always clear. He was failing them. Now, standing on the porch after the dinner party from hell, the fog of denial began to clear. That one comment, too broke to be saved, had been a flash of lightning illuminating the ugly truth of his marriage. He had not been supporting a family, he had been funding a parasitic relationship. He went back inside long after the guests had left. The house was quiet. Clara was in their bedroom, and she did not even look up when he entered. She was scrolling through her phone, a small smile on her face. Friend and mentor. Liam now understood friend and mentor. Liam now understood that Marcus was not a mentor, he was a replacement. She was lining up his successor. The next morning, Liam called in sick to work for the first time in years. His mind was a whirlwind of hurt and suspicion. He needed answers. He started with the hospital. He called the billing department, gave them the account number, and explained he was the one making the payments. The woman on the other end of the line was polite but evasive. "Sir, I can confirm we received your payment, but due to patient confidentiality, I cannot discuss the details of the services provided." "I'm not asking for medical details," Liam pressed, his frustration growing. "I just want to confirm that this is for the autoimmune treatment program for Eleanor Vance." There was a pause. "Sir, I can't confirm or deny the nature of the services associated with this account number. I can only tell you it is in good standing." It was a dead end, but her careful corporate phrasing felt odd. It was not the kind of language he had heard before when dealing with medical bills. Something was wrong. He looked at the payment receipts he had saved. They were all from the St. Jude Wellness Pavilion. He had always assumed it was the name of the specialized clinic. Now, the name seemed strange, more like a spa than a hospital wing. He decided to go there in person. He needed to see it, to understand what he had been paying for. As he was getting ready to leave, Clara came into the living room, dressed for a day out. She looked at his casual clothes with disdain. "You're not going to work dressed like that, are you?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I'm not feeling well." "I took the day off," he replied, his voice flat. She scoffed. "You can't afford to take a day off, Liam. In case you forgot, we have bills to pay. Mother's bills." The way she said it was a deliberate jab, a reminder of his inadequacy. She then smiled brightly. "Well, I'm off to lunch with Marcus. He's thinking of investing in a new gallery, and he wants my opinion. Try not to mope around the house all day. It's depressing." She walked out the door without a backward glance, leaving him in the silent, expensive house. Her words, meant to wound him, only strengthened his resolve. He grabbed his keys and left. He was no longer just searching for answers. He was hunting for the truth. Clara's overconfidence, her blatant disregard for his feelings, was the final push he needed. She believed he was weak, trapped, and utterly defeated. She was about to find out how wrong she was. The St. Jude Wellness Pavilion was not what Liam expected. It was part of the main hospital campus, but it was a separate, sleek, modern building with a private entrance and valet parking. The lobby looked more like a five-star hotel than a medical facility. It was decorated with contemporary art, plush seating areas, and a soft, ambient soundtrack playing through hidden speakers. There was no smell of antiseptic, only the faint, pleasant scent of lemongrass. Liam approached the concierge desk, which was carved from a single piece of polished marble. A woman in a perfectly tailored suit looked up and smiled. "Good morning, sir. How may I help you?" "I'm here about an account," Liam began, his heart pounding. "I've been making payments for a patient, Eleanor Vance." The woman's smile did not falter. She typed the name into her computer. "Ah, yes, Miss Vance. She's one of our residents in the Serenity Suites. Are you here for a visit?" The word resident struck him as odd. Resident? I thought she was here for medical treatment. The concierge's professional veneer cracked for just a second. A flicker of confusion crossed her face before she corrected herself. "Of course. Our residents receive the highest level of wellness care." "I'm sorry, I can't give you any more information due to privacy policies, but if you are the one financially responsible for the account, Perhaps you should speak with our Director of Resident Services, Mr. Hemlock. She pointed him toward a quiet corridor. Liam walked down the hall, his stomach churning. Everything about this place felt wrong. It was too quiet, too luxurious, too healthy. He found the office and was shown in to see a man with silver hair and an impeccably tailored suit. Mr. Hemlock had the smooth, reassuring demeanor of someone used to dealing with the very wealthy. "Mr. Sterling, please, have a seat," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. "I understand you have some questions about Miss Vance's account." "Yes," Liam said, his voice tight. "I was told my mother-in-law was receiving treatment for a serious autoimmune disease. I've been paying for it for 2 years, but this place, it doesn't look like a hospital." Mr. Hemlock steepled his fingers, his expression one of carefully practiced sympathy. "I understand your confusion. The Wellness Pavilion is a unique facility. We offer a discreet, long-term residential experience for discerning clients who require privacy and comfort. Think of it less as a hospital and more as a luxury wellness retreat with medical staff on call." Liam stared at him, the blood roaring in his ears. "A luxury wellness retreat? What are you talking about? She's sick. She needs experimental treatment." The director's sympathetic mask finally slipped. He sighed, a sound of mild annoyance, as if dealing with a particularly slow child. "Mr. Sterling, let me be direct. Your wife, Clara, arranged for her mother to stay here 2 years ago. The account you have been paying into is for the Serenity Suite package. It includes a private 2-room suite, gourmet meal service, a personal concierge, daily spa treatments, and access to our fitness and wellness consultants." He paused, letting the words sink in. "There is no experimental treatment program for an autoimmune disease. To be perfectly blunt, according to our records, Miss Vance's primary medical needs consist of routine checkups and a prescription for mild hypertension. She is, for all intents and purposes, in excellent health for a woman her age." The world tilted on its axis. Every sacrifice, every exhausting hour of overtime, every humiliating moment he had endured, it all flashed before his eyes. It was not for life-saving medicine, it was for spa treatments, for a gourmet lifestyle, for a lie, a monstrous, cruel, and elaborate lie. "So, you're telling me I've been paying for her to live in a hotel?" Liam's voice was a hoarse whisper. "A very exclusive hotel with on-call medical services, yes," Mr. Hemlock clarified, as if that made it better. "The billing is routed through our central system, which I admit can be confusing. It was set up this way at your wife's specific request for discretion." Discretion. They had used that word to hide their fraud. Liam felt a wave of nausea. He had been played for a fool in the most profound way imaginable. His love and sense of duty had been weaponized against him, turned into a cash machine to fund their vanity and comfort. He had been paying for the very life they used to mock him for not being able to provide. The irony was so bitter, it felt like acid in his throat. He remembered the house he had paid for with his grandfather's legacy. On the porch the other night, now spread on the porch the other night, now spread through his entire body, freezing the hurt and grief into something hard and sharp. It was rage, pure, undiluted rage. He stood up, his movements stiff. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Hemlock. You have been very, illuminating." The director gave him a polite, dismissive nod. Liam walked out of the office, out of the silent, lemongrass-scented lobby, and back into the real world. The sunlight seemed too bright, the sounds of the city too loud. He was a different man from the one who had walked in an hour ago. The victim was gone. In his place was an architect of vengeance. He did not go home. He drove to a small, unassuming office building downtown, The name on the directory was Davies and Associates Legal Counsel. His grandfather had always spoken highly of Mr. Davies. "He's not a shark," his grandfather used to say. "He's a crocodile. He waits patiently, and when he bites, he never lets go." Liam knew he needed a crocodile. Mr. Davies was an older man with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. He listened to Liam's entire story without interruption, his expression unreadable. He reviewed the deed to the house, the bank statements showing the inheritance, and the 2 years of payments to the Wellness Pavilion. When Liam finished, the office was silent for a long moment. Then a slow, grim smile spread across Mr. Davies's face. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice a low rumble, "what your wife and her mother have done is not just morally reprehensible, it is fraud, grand larceny by deception to be precise, and they have been remarkably sloppy about it." A wave of relief washed over Liam. It was real. He was not crazy. "What can we do?" "We're not going to do something," the lawyer corrected him gently. "We're going to do everything. We will dismantle their lives with surgical precision, using the very legal and financial systems they clearly hold in such contempt. It will be swift, it will be brutal, and it will be entirely legal." The plan they formulated was elegant in its cruelty. Phase 1 was to cut off the money supply. Mr. Davies drafted a letter to the St. Jude Wellness Pavilion. It stated that all future payments were terminated immediately, and that an investigation for financial fraud was being launched against both Eleanor and Clara Vance. It demanded a full, itemized accounting of all services rendered, threatening the hospital with legal action for facilitating the deception if they did not comply. Phase 2 was the house. Mr. Davies explained that because the down payment came from a premarital, inherited asset, Liam had a very strong claim to sole ownership. They would file a petition to have Clara's name removed from the deed due to fraudulent misrepresentation within the marriage. An eviction notice would follow. Phase 3 was the lawsuit. They would sue Clara and Eleanor for the full amount Liam had paid over the past 2 years, plus damages for emotional distress. They would freeze any accounts they could touch and place liens on any assets they might have. "They built their world on your back, Mr. Sterling," Davies said, his eyes glinting. "We are simply going to remove the foundation. The rest will take care of itself." Liam felt a surge of power he had not felt in years. For the first time, he was not just reacting to his wife's whims, he was taking control. He signed the papers, his hand steady. The decision was made. The war had begun. The first domino fell the next afternoon. Eleanor was in her suite, enjoying a cucumber water after her daily aromatherapy massage, when the manager of the pavilion requested an urgent meeting. The manager, a woman who usually treated Eleanor with fawning deference, was now cold and formal. "Miss Vance," she said, not bothering to sit down, "we have received a notice from your benefactor's legal counsel. All payments on your account have been stopped, effective immediately. There are also some very serious allegations of fraud." Eleanor stared at her, uncomprehending. "What are you talking about? It must be a mistake, a bank error." "There is no mistake," the manager replied, her voice like ice. "You have an outstanding balance for the current month. Furthermore, as you are no longer a resident in good standing, our policy requires that you vacate the suite within 24 hours. Panic, an emotion Eleanor had not felt in years, seized her. "Vacate? This is my home. You can't just throw me out." "We can, and we will," the manager said, turning to leave. "Please have your belongings packed by noon tomorrow." Eleanor scrambled for her phone, her hands shaking. She called Clara, her voice a hysterical shriek. "They're kicking me out. They said Liam stopped the payments. You have to fix this." Clara was at lunch with Marcus, laughing at one of his jokes. She rolled her eyes at her mother's theatrics. "Mother, calm down. It's obviously a misunderstanding. Liam wouldn't dare. I'll handle it." She confidently pulled out her credit card to pay for lunch, a supplementary card linked to an account Liam managed. The waiter returned a moment later, his expression apologetic. "I'm so sorry, madam, but this card has been declined." Clara frowned. "That's impossible. Run it again." He did. It was declined again. A cold knot of dread began to form in her stomach. She tried another card. Declined. She excused herself and tried to call Liam. His phone went straight to voicemail. She called the bank. A polite, automated voice informed her that the accounts had been frozen by the primary account holder. The dread turned into full-blown panic. She made her excuses to a suddenly distant-looking Marcus and rushed out of the restaurant. Her world, so carefully constructed and effortlessly maintained, was starting to crack at the seams. When she got home, a certified letter was waiting for her on the doorstep. It was from Davies and Associates. Inside was a formal notice of separation and a court summons. She was being sued for fraud. Attached to it was a copy of the eviction notice that had been filed with the court. She sank onto the Italian leather sofa, the papers trembling in her hand. This could not be happening. Not to her. Liam, her pathetic, spineless, broke husband, could not be doing this. It was a bluff, a desperate, pathetic cry for attention. She would call him and she would scream at him and he would fold, just like he always did. But her calls went unanswered. Her increasingly frantic texts were met with a deafening silence. The next day, Eleanor showed up at the front door, her luggage in tow, her face a mask of fury and fear. "They actually did it! They threw me out like a common criminal." The two women spent the next 48 hours in a state of escalating hysteria. They called everyone they knew, trying to find a lawyer who would help them, trying to borrow money. But news travels fast in their social circle. The word was out. Clara was being sued for fraud by her own husband. Her new beau, Marcus, who valued his reputation above all else, stopped taking her calls. Her fair-weather friends offered sympathy but no actual help. They were toxic assets now, and no one wanted to be associated with them. Liam, meanwhile, was staying at a friend's apartment. He watched the chaos unfold from a distance with a calm, detached satisfaction. He felt no guilt, no remorse. Every panicked voicemail, every venomous text message only served to reinforce the righteousness of his actions. He was not destroying their lives. He was simply holding up a mirror, forcing them to see the ruin they had built themselves. After a week of being ignored, her options exhausted, Clara became desperate. She found out where Liam worked and waited for him outside the main gate at the end of his shift. She looked like a different person. Her hair was a mess, her expensive clothes were wrinkled, and her eyes were wild with desperation. Eleanor was with her, looking small and defeated. When Liam walked out, Clara ran toward him, her voice a raw scream. "Liam, what have you done? You're ruining us! You're ruining my life!" Liam stopped and looked at her. He felt nothing but a distant pity. The fear and intimidation she had held over him for years were gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "Your life?" he asked, his voice even and steady. "The life you were living was a lie, Clara, a lie I paid for." "You're a liar!" she shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "Mother was sick. She needed that care." This was the moment he had been waiting for. The final confrontation. The delivery of the truth. He looked past Clara to Eleanor, who refused to meet his gaze. "She wasn't sick, Clara," he said, his voice cutting through her hysterics like a blade. I went to the wellness pavilion. I spoke to the director. I know everything. He let the words hang in the air. He saw the flicker of panic in her eyes, the dawning horror that her great deception had been uncovered. You spent 2 years treating me like I was worthless, he continued, his voice growing stronger, filled with the weight of 2 years of silent suffering. You stood in our home and told a room full of people I was too broke to be saved. But what you didn't know, what you were too arrogant and self-absorbed to ever even consider, was that my worthless salary was paying for your mother's 5-star hotel room. You were mocking me for being broke while you were siphoning my last dime to pay for her spa days and gourmet meals. Clara's face went completely white. The denials died on her lips. The truth, so plainly and brutally stated, was undeniable. She stared at him, her mouth opening and closing, but no sounds came out. The foundation of her world had just been obliterated. You built a fantasy on my back, Liam said, his voice dropping to a low, cold tone. You complained that I was not enough, while I was killing myself to be everything for you. I sold my car. I worked until I was sick. I gave up every dream I ever had. And you used that sacrifice to fund your vanity. You are not a victim here, Clara. You are a thief. The last word shattered her completely. A terrible, guttural sob ripped from her throat. She collapsed onto the pavement, a weeping, pathetic heap. All the polished elegance, all the cruel confidence was gone. She was nothing without the money and status she had stolen from him. Eleanor just stood there, a statue of silent ruin, her own complicity exposed to the world. Liam looked down at the woman he had once loved, the woman who had become a stranger to him, and he felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of finality. The lawyers have everything, he said quietly. It's over. He turned his back on her sobbing form and walked away. He did not look back. He left her there on the sidewalk, surrounded by the wreckage of the life she had destroyed. The legal proceedings were swift and decisive. Faced with irrefutable evidence from the hospital and Liam's financial records, Clara and Eleanor had no defense. The court found them guilty of fraud. A judgment was entered against them for the full amount Liam had paid, plus punitive damages. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly seen her share of family disputes, was particularly scathing in her summary, calling their actions a breathtaking display of greed and moral corruption. The house was declared Liam's sole property. The liens on their assets, meagre as they were executed. They were left with nothing. Bankrupt and socially ostracized, they were forced to sell off every last piece of designer clothing and jewelry just to afford the deposit on a tiny, run-down apartment on the other side of town. Clara, who had never held a real job in her life, was forced to take a position as a cashier at a grocery store. Eleanor, stripped of her pampered lifestyle, had to work as a cleaner at a budget motel. The humiliation was total and complete. Their former friends would cross the street to avoid them. They had become the very people they had once looked down upon with such disdain. Liam, on the other hand, began to rebuild his life. He sold the large, empty house that held so many bitter memories. The sale, combined with the money recovered from the lawsuit, left him with a substantial sum. But he had no desire for a lavish lifestyle. The experience had taught him the true meaning of wealth. He used a portion of the money to finally start the business he had dreamed of for so long, a small, specialized logistics consultancy. He was good at it, and the business grew steadily. He took the rest of the money and established a charitable foundation. It was named after his grandfather, and its mission was to provide direct financial aid to families struggling with the crippling, non-insured costs of legitimate medical treatments. It was through the foundation that he met Sarah. She was a nurse who worked with one of the families his charity was helping. She was kind, compassionate, and had a warmth that seemed to radiate from her. She was impressed not by his money, but by his generosity and the quiet strength she saw in his eyes. They started talking, then went for coffee, then dinner. For the first time in years, Liam felt a genuine connection, one built on mutual respect and shared values, not on transactions and expectations. A year after the divorce was finalized, Liam and Sarah were walking through a park on a sunny afternoon. He was telling her a story about his grandfather, and he was laughing, a real, unburdened laugh that came from deep within. He felt light. He felt free. The ghosts of his past had been exorcised. He had learned a hard and painful lesson. True wealth was not measured in the size of a house or the brand of a car. It was measured in integrity, in peace of mind, and in the quiet joy of a life lived honestly. True power did not lie in what was displayed for the world to see, but in the strength of one's character. Deceit and cruelty could build a glittering palace, but it was a palace made of glass, destined to be shattered by the first stone of truth. Liam had thrown that stone, and now he was free to build his own future, a future on a foundation that could never be broken.